Good morning. I think we are live. Looks like it. Oh, I'm still letting the caffeine kick in, so I'm not going to be too chipper until it happens. But this morning I am going to be continuing work on a Gatsby theme that I've been porting over. Hopefully my volume is at an appropriate level, but I guess I will find out later. Okay. So this actually started out in using SAS and Bulma back at the beginning of this year or end of last year maybe. And I've kind of gotten sick of trying to get SAS to work as a themable thing. So I've started switching to Theme UI. And we've got it's a mono repo, and we've got a couple packages here. And you can see I've got some unsaved work that I was working on last time. This is basically made up of a homepage, a layout which wraps most of the things, and then articles. And for the most part, I'm porting over the pieces that I use on my personal website. Let's get things started up here. So this is what my personal site looks like right now. This will end up being the homepage piece, and the idea is to dynamically pull in these sections or make it easy to for someone to use this and shadow a piece or pieces that will bring in these little sections. This recipes, I actually have that mostly done as a theme, and probably could use a little bit more design and definitely more documentation, but that's pretty much taken care of. And right now we kind of just have this top piece, and we're slowly working on the articles section. You might see some cats jumping in and out of the picture here. I got two of them. Oh, yep, caffeine hasn't kicked in yet. Gotta be in the right directory to run that. Yeah, so anyway, we have two cats. They're named Bamboo and Balsam, which is the names that actually came from the place where we got them. I can't think what it's called now. Not a rescue, but well, whatever. They're supposed to be both short hair, but this one black and white one, Bamboo. She is rather long-haired. So you might notice that we're working on Windows. Fun times. I don't mind it. I've been using Windows for a while, and it's rather typical in my industry to use Windows. Most of our programs are not on any platform traditionally, and they've been slowly moving over. But in my industry, you might have seen that. My day job is doing the type of engineering that works on buildings. But there's a lot of crossovers between the type of logic and things that we do here and tech. And it's pretty neat to see those cross over more and pull from. I can pull from the things that have been learned in the tech community and use them in my day job. So let's see where we're at. We got kind of just that simple home page. So this started out as a Bulma based theme. Where are we? Bulma. Here we go. So pretty much the same sort of package structure and everything, and I've just been moving pieces of it over. For right now, I'm not doing core packages, but rather kind of keeping things more contained, and then only split out as I feel a real need to, or if there's any reason to maybe in the future not use theme UI or not be dependent on theme UI if somebody wants to use kind of the core pieces of the theme without the actual styling that comes with it. But one thing at a time. So let us, I don't want to get into the article stuff quite yet, but I feel like our nav can probably use some work. So let's look at what we've sort of been working on the nav lately. I've essentially copy and pasted much of what I was working on in the previous theme over. So there's a lot of classes and just raw HTML in the previous version. So I pulled in this isolated theme UI components that I mostly built up on the Gatsby theme recipes, and I've just been using those and converting over components. Too far. Okay. So our header is pretty much untouched, and our footer is well. So it looks like we've switched the nav into more split up components. Go ahead and wrap up some of this nav stuff and get things saved. Okay, so I have a box component and nav. I probably don't need this class name there anymore. I've got a link component, and that's essentially wrapping the link component from Gatsby. We are using, if you have noticed the naming convention, we're using isolated theme UI, which is a library that Chris Biscardi wrote, and it helps to split up different theme UI themes. So as you are working on a theme, your interaction with other themes existing in someone's site won't collaborate each other, or the main theme on that site won't clobber all the child or themes that somebody else pulls in, which is kind of handy. There's definitely more work to kind of be done in that area, but this is sufficient for now, and we can always switch up these components later. So it looks like we've got kind of two sections. We've got the branding on the left. I think what we're going to end up doing here is switching nav into a flex. So our Flexbox, it's rather light implementation, but on a few of these, particularly the flex in the box component that I have made so far, makes use of this, as I say that, flex doesn't. Let's open up box so we have an example, but we're going to need to add it to flex. It makes use of this as prop, and then it lets you, we can set a default, and then it lets somebody consume this component, and then they can modify the actual underlying HTML element rather easy, rather than making a whole ton of components to basically use any raw HTML that someone would want to use. So we're going to add this flex down here and here. And that's probably about as simple as you need to get to make this as prop work on the left here. So we have a nav bar brand. So this is mostly the Bulma implementation. I think for the time being, we are going to rid ourselves of this button. We'll just comment it out for the moment. Because we don't really have enough links on the top that it will make a difference. And you can see here we've got this, we're pulling some things from the site metadata. I'm not sure how to best approach that yet, as far as if we should rely on documentation to let people know that this exists, or actually do schema customization. We'll kind of figure that out as we go. Okay. So the nav links. Now we don't really have the pictures working here yet either. So this is going to be dependent on if we have a logo set, which comes in through the one of the lower components. Okay, let's start making boxes of stuff. We want our default direction for this flex component is row, so that's fine. We will have a box around our main logo. We're getting some errors. Flex. We need to import flex. Okay, so we've got kind of our general layout. I think eventually it makes sense to make this pull into more of a hamburger kind of situation, hamburger menu sort of situation, but at least it is sufficiently functional as is right now. Okay, let's clean up some of this. So this coloring thing was my patchwork way to get the colors of the nav to work with Bulma, so we can strip out that. We still want this link going to the home page. This is going to become a text component. And you might notice that I've got Prettier enabled on, I'm using VS Code right now, which is a IDE put out by Microsoft, open source. But I can write pretty terrible code like this and hit save and it cleans it up, which is super handy. So my website name, I guess you would call it, is coming from my metadata, and then I can pull an icon too if that is available. And I imagine that logic here is probably sufficient right now. We do not have some of the new JS features landed, where you can do some easier traversal of nested objects, rather than using these and or stuff to properly pull data. Actually, this is not a traversal. What I'm doing here is more so honestly, I don't remember what inverse does. We'll have to look into that. But we will come back to it. Okay, so we need another box around the nav links. Actually, let's put it in the map. So if there... Ugh, that's gross. Okay, so this can become a box. What we're doing is we're looping yep. Oh, that doesn't need to be a box. This needs to be a box. So here we are looping over, or rather mapping over, I guess is probably the more correct way to say it. All of the links that are set in the metadata to give us links up at the top. So it looks like we are getting, oh, we need data key. I always forget that. Key will be this. So for our text, actually I don't want the logo wrapped in our text component. Ooh. Go away, text. But just the title should be wrapped in it. Oh my goodness. My control key on this computer is not the it doesn't work the best. So sometimes you'll see that I try to copy and paste or similar, and I end up not. Looks like we got a couple people this morning. Good morning. Hey, Ryan Warner. So did you just find out about the Blocks UI yesterday? For those that might be watching this afterwards, a handful of us are a part of a Discord, and there's a good chunk of streamers in there, and Ryan Warner just joined yesterday, if I recall correctly. It's funny how things go like that, right? So Ryan Warner, I suppose I can just do this. Hey, the text does come through. So I'm working on porting over a Gatsby theme that I originally started using Bulma and SAS, and realized that that does not scale. And I kind of started it before themes were actually implemented. Even the experimental stuff that Chris Biscardi did. But I rehashed everything about maybe middle of this year or so, and realized that it does not scale, and I kind of didn't want to continue it just because it was so painful to try to get any theming actually working. And that's sort of right when the theme UI stuff was really picking up, and that's when I started jumping into that. So I guess depending on if you count this is 1 or 3 themes. This currently has 3 themes in it, and I've done a theme prior, which does allows somebody to show the recipes on their website. I can go ahead and pull that one up. So this is the old this is the old theme that I was working off of. And here's the recipe theme. It's mostly working. So this would just be whatever homepage the user wants to have. So it's more intended to be brought into a code base that has existing pieces to it. So it's not really meant to be a full-on theme like some of the other ones are. It's meant to like be put on your personal site or something like that. But you can configure it. But for the most part, most of it lives here. I do have some cleaning up on the data. This is actually pulling from my personal Airtable right now. And the plugin is just built to work off of Airtable currently, but I've used the schema customization to allow it to pull in from any data source that you like. So pretty bare bones right now, but it'll keep coming along. Don't have it on any of my personal. I mean, I've got the old version on my personal site, but that's sort of where this all came from. So we'll eventually be putting this piece on the homepage theme, and it looks pretty similar to this, to what's on the theme currently. So I'm porting over the theme that will eventually run on this site. and a couple other sites that I maintain, and then I'll put on the that recipe theme on that one. I feel like it humanizes you, and it's definitely one of those, half the battle of meeting and talking with somebody is to, the fastest way to get comfortable with somebody is to get common ground. And obviously one way to do that is through the code and articles that you might write on your website, but everybody eats. So rather than talking about the weather, it's much, I think it's much better to talk about food, especially if you've got a theme or something that points to recipes that you rather enjoy. Plus, if you all put that on your website, I get to eat all the great food that everybody else makes. Okay. So we've got our button commented out. We've got that pretty much cleaned up. Now, why is this not? Okay, so our nav. They're probably too wide. So I tend to come back to this rather often. CSS Tricks does a good Flexbox guide. So right now we've got the row, and I'm looking for, I think we probably want to do flex shrink, which apparently is defaulting to 1. So, yeah, it looks like our width here is set to 50%, and I'm guessing with the slight padding that we have in here, that's why this is wrapping before we expect it to. So if we would turn off this, alright, so why are you wrapping? So this comes from the downside of this, the theme UI and this like generated code is it's not super obvious where these come from just looking at it. So the header component, we've got no width, or almost all the width rather, no padding or flex shrink. I think that defaults to 1. And nav is our flex component. Row, yeah. So we've got the row, and we do use the column as actually how we do the sticky footer portion of this. So this up and down is also a Flexbox implementation. we go. So it's the padding that's bumping it over. So I think we probably want to switch that to so that's coming from our box. I wonder if we just want to do this. Set the padding to 0, but then give it a little bit of a margin. Nope. I think we do want to leave the... that one's still got padding too. So have you used Theme UI yet, Ryan Warner? Ryan? Feels weird saying your full name every time. Got a bunch of people in here. Nobody's talkative in the morning, are they? Okay. Yeah, I was never initially sold on styled components or emotion. So part of me was just waiting for things to shake out. Yeah, Tailwind definitely seems pretty popular. My first use of Theme UI was actually on a Create React app, which I might end up streaming some of that as well. Yeah, definitely hard to prioritize learning versus building. I tend to be a builder. I'll just pick a project and start building, and when something feels like it needs to be in here, I do a lot of reading about different things that come out, and when I've run into an issue that I'm having and I feel like I can use something to help that I read about, I will go learn about it more and decide if I should bring it in, and then that's how I end up learning new things. I think I've heard it called just-in-time learning before. I'd rather like that method functioning, because it sort of focuses you rather than, running all over the place and chasing squirrels, which I think I probably would end up doing if I didn't focus myself more. Okay, so we need this section to shrink. And we probably want to do some stuff where we can stick pieces to the right or left. And to do that, we're probably going to use some sort of flex start and flex end would be my assumption. Because space between would get odd, because you'd have a random link up in the center. So we might actually end up having two flexes in the navigation. Don't think we're going to use align items or align content. So is there anything that you're working on building, Ryan? So I think what we actually want to do is set flex grow to be the, actually that might be sufficient to push stuff to the right as well. If we set our flex grow to be 1, I think that'll actually bump over everything else that has flex shrink. Okay, but that's still bumping to that second line. Why are you doing that? So if we can play around with the properties here. I mean, because even with that at 50%, it might be my default. No. There we go. Okay. So this is coming from the box. Let's make this jet window bigger. So what's providing the flex in the box components? So that's actually just custom components that I wrote. This isolated theme UI isolates the context, and it was something that was written by Chris Biscardi. So we pull that in here. And then that allows us to isolate from the main theme UI that's in the user's site. And then from there, it's just small little components. So flex and the box component, which just implement CSS to do the flex box portion of it. It's pretty similar to what Rebase and the theme UI components does. Just much simpler, I guess. So Ryan says that he's been working on a React boilerplate, rapid prototyping. So is this React boilerplate something that you would end up using at work? So in my box, I actually have like a default set for the width with 3 breakpoints. And that's where all of this is coming from. So how do we want to do that? I mean, we really just want to let it grow to whatever size it needs to be. So I wonder if we might just do something like, I haven't actually tried this, but if we just say set our width to null, we'll see what it does. Did that work? Hey, there we go. So if we look at the CSS for this, we can see that that's shrinked and that has grown to the size that it actually needs to push everything to the right. So we don't have to do a nested flex box kind of thing. Okay, so you use the spoiler plate for work personal. That's how I actually got it started in my React. I went to a talk. Somebody was doing a talk on the whatever they called it back then, isomorphic React, I think is what it was then. And that sort of kickstarted my interest in React. I knew it was something that I was going to get interested in, but kind of the same thing as before. I didn't want to squirrel off on another random JavaScript library that was starting up, but after it had been around for a little bit and they were starting to work on the isomorphic patterns, it started to get real interesting. So that's when I pulled in a React boilerplate and bloodied my knuckles figuring that out. And that's how actually sort of what led me into Gatsby. I wanted to write D3GS with React, and I needed a good way to put that on the web as articles. And that was a heck of a lot easier to do with Gatsby than any sort of React client-side kind of thing. Okay, so we've got that working. And it's all links. We've got the button pieces there, and I think I'll just remove some of this for right now. So the idea is that when we hit a certain breakpoint, that the button will show instead of the nav links. Probably don't need that on there, I think. Alright, I don't feel like doing with the button right now, and I don't need it for my personal site, so we're going to punt that for later. Otherwise, I think we kind of have everything else. I'm assuming the logo will still work from what I did previously. We can come back to that if we need to. Looks like I'm actually not using the Gatsby image for that. Do I have an image component or anything? Oh. So Ryan was asking about blogger articles. I haven't done too much. I find I have a hard time writing, so I've started actually recording my thoughts, just using like text to speech and then slowly translating that into an actual article. So I've got a couple a little bit more recent, but there's definitely some big gaps. But I've got a handful of them in draft status that once I finally get this theme updated, I'll probably write about that and then pull those draft articles in as well. I sort of cornered myself. This uses the recipes, and I've changed my structure for how I have it in your Airtable. So if I actually update this site as it is right now, my recipes stuff will break. So I'm kind of just not updating it until I get the other stuff done. I guess there's a little bit of incentive there, but it also is a poor excuse to not write. Yeah, I don't know. It's just I've never been a big writer per se. I think that's just sort of a natural thing that most people aren't really. It's a learned skill, and for the most part, at least the U.S. education system doesn't seem to teach that sufficiently. But to get better at writing, you just need to write more. But I have a hard time starting. So if I can get stuff down on paper, then it's a lot easier for me to edit and sort of move forward from there. Okay, so let's finish up the footer component, and then that will probably be sufficient for a commit. So this has a box. And I think we're also going to want to put a flex in here. Let's close some of this, give us some more room to look. So we did a flex as nav. I think we're also going to want to do a flex I think we just wrap this whole thing in a box. I always forget to import stuff, right? I feel like VS Code only actually imports stuff for you automatically when you don't want it to. Okay, it's centered-ish. What's that look like here? So we probably want to set, so it is centering it. If we look at, I think this only shrinks because we have this one set to grow. But let's see if there is a better way that we can justify it. I think in this one we probably want to do center. So justify content might be what we want to use here. So my control button isn't the greatest on this computer for whatever reason. So sometimes when I try to copy stuff, I don't actually copy it, which is rather infuriating, but not enough apparently to try to fix it. Okay. And I'm guessing we probably want to do flex shrink, set that to 1, which honestly I think that's the default. So that's not going to help us. Flex shrink, default to 1, yep. Okay, so we got to figure out a better way to make this centered. So this piece, so really we just need to center this. Because all of our flex stuff is centered as we would hope. 50% width. It's kind of weird that it affects the other stuff. Ah, okay, so how do we deal with this? We basically want this to shrink to the content. I don't need those class names on there anymore at all. I think I'm going to convert this whole thing to a text component. And I'll actually remember to import a set component. More class names. So this is just a link right now, not the link component. But I think we actually want to convert that to the component. Let's open the link component up. Because I think I have it set up to also take, we've got a 2. Okay, so it's just straight up using the, I think maybe we want to put in an extra prop in here that we can define the underlying component that it's actually using. So we can make our default here be link, and we need to differentiate our link component from Gatsby. So we can probably do link as Gatsby link. I would assume that's obvious enough. Link. Okay, so now we'll use the Gatsby link by default. Let's just double check. We've got a good way to do that. Yes, that looks like it works. But in this case, we want our link to be as a which should mean that there we go again. Forgot to import link. So apparently that did not work. So it is an A. Oh, we gotta convert the 2. Oh, that's annoying. So Gatsby link uses 2, which is what we were using. But if this becomes an A, then we actually want it to be href. I guess I probably need to do a conditional for this. Yeah, that is mildly annoying. Because I don't really want to dump the href on there just by default. Yeah, I'm thinking that I have to do if Well, I can say I don't want to change the props. I just always want to pass in 2. But what we can do is if we want to render this as it's really hard to say, in an anchor link, I guess. Then we can use that to say push the 2 prop to href. Then that way our top level API is always going to use 2. So we can say if as equals a and then we can do, now we just, here we would say href 2. So I'm going to assume that if we're doing an anchor link, the only time we ever want to do that is if it's an external link, in which case we probably want to set the target to open up in a new window as a default. I think that probably makes sense. So we can say target equals blank if I remember correctly. As is not defined. Well, that's link. I don't know if this will work. I've never actually tried it with this like nested component thing. Thank you, handy warnings. I would also like to put that in there. Come on. So this will basically prevent Google or other search engines from connecting this site to whatever the link goes to, as far as SEO purposes go, which I think generally makes sense. Okay, so we have an A. It still says 2. So we are this is not coming out as expected. So let's go ahead and just log that out. We're going to need to wrap stuff. Return console.log link. What does link look like? It says it's an A. Oh, that's not helpful. Let's do link. Let's also log out the 2 so we know what it's pointing to. Okay. Yeah, so it should be A. Oh, you know what? I gotta flip-flop them. Because I want to say if it's not link, then it's going to go to our internal stuff. And the only time we ever want to do this is if it is link. There we go. That should open up in a new window. Perfect. Oop. Get rid of a bunch of this and this. There we go. Okay, we have updated our link component to take anchor links that go outside of the website. Alright, I think that's probably oh, we wanted a... Well, that definitely got bigger. It's probably my default theme stuff. Oh. Each one, interesting. Text. Does my text default to each one? Sure enough. I probably copied that over from heading and forgot to change it. So I guess I probably wanted this text to default to spam. There we go. That's more what I expected. Okay, so this piece is coming in with, I mean, I think the padding is probably fine on there. But we wanted like legitimately centered, not offset centered. I mean, this seems correct. It's taken up effectively the whole container. And this also makes sense. Oh, that's off already. That's off. Okay, so the width is what's setting that. So it's sort of the same deal as above. And when I say above, I mean the header component. So what did we do there again? I think we set width to null. Oop. Not heading, header. Header. Yep, width is null. There we go. Okay. Now the one thing that I want to fix before we save here, I don't want that scroll bar to appear. So it looks like it's only, so I checked it on this and it was fine. So I didn't check it on smaller sizes. So once we start getting slightly less wide, then we get that scroll bar in there. So let's see if we can fix that. So this has some padding. Which I gotta imagine isn't an issue, but let's just see what it does. Oh, I guess it is. Okay. So we probably want to change that to margin, would be my guess. And that's coming from the default set in box. or padding, that is. So we have a padding of 3 as our default. So in our main component, which shows up in nav, we want the padding to be 0 and margin to be 1, maybe. There we go. Okay. This is still a little bit annoying, but I think we make that a I think we need to make that a hamburger button anyways, so we can come back to that. Ryan just said that he needs to learn GraphQL. If you haven't used Gatsby before, that is sort of a quasi selling point of it, I guess. It allows you to, they basically dynamically build a GraphQL server that you can query. So you essentially dump all your data into an built on demand GraphQL server, and then your components write queries to access that. And it's all of this only happens on the build end. Which definitely has its benefits because you can pull in from multiple sources. And as in this case, we are, this theme itself doesn't, but when I put it on my website, the recipes will be pulling from Airtable, and the pages or the articles will be pulling probably from a combination of MDX and JavaScript files. I've got some of my D3 stuff written in JavaScript, but those might just get switched over to be MDX as well. MDX is a extension on Markdown, which gives some sugar to allow you to import components. So it's kind of like a weird mix of JSX and Markdown. So it ends up being a little bit like, if anybody's familiar with the shortcodes in WordPress. Okay, so I think we're done with our layout components and all of our navs, so I think we probably can go ahead and commit some of this stuff, which I probably should have done a bunch before. I tend to commit often, but everything was so tied together in this one that it was sort of hard to split apart. So let's go ahead and just open up a new instance here. I got into using Remark because that was the original thing that Gatsby used. Remark was the basically the Markdown processor. So I did some pretty interesting things with that, but I never made the jump over to MDX. So this is sort of going to be my jump over to MDX. I think we could probably just commit all of these components as an update. Git commit. What shall we name these? Commit message. Ryan's asking if I've played with Storybook at all. I have used it, as in somebody else implemented, and I ran the thing that you can click around in. So I've seen it used and I've seen what it can do, but I haven't gone any more than that. The whole shiny object syndrome. It would be cool to use, but I just haven't found the effort worth it for what I've been doing. Oh, really? They added MDX support. That's kind of nifty. Okay, what should I call this? Probably just say components. Component functionality. Functionality upgrades. That's good enough for now. You can see we're still committing to master. I will eventually start doing, whoops. I'll eventually start doing this as PRs to master, but until I get stuff like sufficiently working, it doesn't really make sense to introduce that additional overhead. Let's see if I can type this in the second time. There we go. Okay, so what else do we have? This is mostly layout. So I think we'll probably do and we'll group all that into one. Okay, let's go ahead and push that up. So didn't really have a specific end time. I was planning on kind of just going until my daughter woke up, which I'm expecting to happen sort of soon. Talking about MDX and Markdown though. One of the interesting things I was futzing around with was, so this is a rather old Gatsby site, and I was sort of using it as testing ground for doing things with Remark. So these are actually template components that are written using Markdown and LaTeX, and then I do some processing through of the Markdown and actually create the inputs and make all of this dynamic, which is kind of crazy actually. And then it gives you the actual answer. So if we would switch something like, well, this is a complex one. Let's go to something that's a little bit more easy to see. So here you can see we're testing basically cascading of the values. So if we set a variable to C and give inputs of A and B, so if we switch this to say 400, now it should calculate D plus C, which is 412 plus 300. And then E plus C. So basically, F ends up being A plus B plus A plus B plus D. And this is written in LaTeX in Markdown. And then this ends up being functions that run, that are produced at build time, and then imported imported into the Gatsby, and then will run dynamically. It was a pretty interesting test. I think with MDX, it's probably easier to do that kind of stuff now. But I have a feeling I'll probably pick up something like this for future projects. Okay. What's the next thing we want to look at? So I guess it's probably the article stuff. Oh. We can still do... So right now we just have sort of that top header part. Before we dive too far into the articles. So let's look at our Gatsby node. So Gatsby tends to complain about GraphQL queries that it's not using. So we have this hacky workaround where we actually name this file Node.js, so then it doesn't pick it up. And then what we end up doing is in our Gatsby node, we do some hackery in the pre-bootstrap phase to decide if, and actually that's wrong, because I've switched my nodes to be called something different. Well, let's go ahead and give that a update. I can't remember if I used the plural version of it or not. Which is probably not a great sign as far as, yeah, I did use the plural. So we want to say if, stop articles. So it'll essentially dynamically, if there is an article node, then at least the idea is that we can dynamically show pieces on the homepage. So I used to call this blog, which, I mean, they're sort of synonyms, but the idea behind, I think I heard this first from Patio 11. And if you don't follow him on Twitter, he's probably one of my more favorite follows. But he's been doing the internet thing for quite a while in writing, and he says that I read it there first, that his differentiation between articles and blog posts is that blog posts are more inferior. Yep. Yeah, that's actually a little bit more of a recent change. Maybe about a year ago. It's got to be pretty close to his year anniversary, I feel like. But he was doing the bootstrap micro entrepreneur kind of thing prior to that. But he said that articles, the differentiation is that articles are more evergreen, and the blog posts are a little bit more inferior, and you should write things that are more evergreen, or write with intention of things being evergreen. And that also kind of helps with SEO too, because Google will downrank things that are older. Evergreen as in, so a good example, if you write something, an article that's explaining how to do something in Gatsby version 1, say 1.1, as soon as Gatsby version 1.2 comes out and you have a date on that article, somebody coming to that page is going to be like, well, it's outdated and I want to find something that's more up to date. It's kind of hard to do this with code because you have that built-in time time component to it, where things get outdated as libraries update. But all the other articles are more it's easier to write, where somebody coming to it 3 or 4 or 5 years later, they're still you're not going to be immediately turned off because there's a date on the article that says that it was written 5 years ago. That's probably the best way to explain it. Okay, so let's see if this actually works. I don't know if this is going to work with the on pre-bootstrap phase, but this worked. It didn't fail, so I kind of just went with it for the moment, and I was going to come back and check. That warning is really going to get annoying. I'm going to have to attack that sooner than I was hoping. I suppose I could just comment it out, but whatever. So the idea is here that it'll make sure that this directory exists. It'll take these components and templates that we wrote and copy them into a cache folder. And then as far as GraphQL is concerned, we're actually operating out of the cache folder. So it ends up being a little bit wonky, but and we'll probably have to likely rename these two to be Node.js as well to get this to work. But hopefully Gatsby ends up including some way to ignore files, some sort of API or something where we can say, hey, this is a thing that we want to ignore. Yeah, Ryan said, and blog posts are not evergreen. Yeah, they're kind of by definition time dated and not evergreen. So the mind is powerful. So if you rename your blog posts and call them articles, you will sort of trick yourself into using more evergreen content, or writing for the intention for it to be more evergreen. So it's sort of just a mental trick for yourself, and then that sort of forces the issue up front. I thought I might have heard the kiddo waking up, but maybe not. Let's see if this worked. So it will. Okay, so we need to. It will dynamically use the homepage or the homepage with articles. At least that's the intention. And then both of these use this layout component, which will bring in the landing and the about. which if we look at my personal site, landing is this top part, the about is this section, and the expectation is that I might actually make this professional engagements a component that's in the or in the theme as well. But for right now, this is in the Gatsby theme Bulma. This is actually just a custom thing that I added in. But we want articles to essentially dynamically pull in if you have articles and the plugin is installed. That's the intention. So if you don't have that, you don't have to touch config at all, and it'll just bring in these two sections. As soon as you add articles, it'll bring in this section. Obviously, you can adjust things with the config or with shadowing, but then the attempt is that we can provide a website with very minimal configuration and very minimal actual code required, and that the user can progressively customize it as they want, rather than kind of depending on and jumping to shadowing immediately. And if you're not familiar with the shadowing in Gatsby, this is something that Chris Biscardi wrote for Gatsby as well. The when you make a theme prior to this, there wasn't really a great way to customize pieces of that theme. You sort of had to use it all or nothing, unless you're doing some hacky thing like we're sort of doing here. The idea behind shadowing is you can drop a file in a folder with the name of said theme on your personal site, and then it will use that instead of the file that's in the theme. So you can basically piecemeal replace components that are in themes that you're using, which is super powerful, but it means that it's, for theme maintainers, it's going to be a pain to basically provide any sort of semver if somebody is doing shadowing, because anybody could shadow any piece of this and do anything that they want in it, and it could potentially break on a patch update, which is unfortunate. But with great power comes great responsibility, right? Okay, so we have so right now all we're doing is trying to use the home page. So what we want to do is we're going to need to both of, well, they don't actually. That's handy. So neither of these have queries, so we don't have to do this hacky stuff here necessarily. I might actually not need to do the hacky stuff on this one. We also did it in the articles, which I think we're going to have to. Yeah, you can see here. But we might not actually need to do it here because, oh, yep, yeah, we do. So articles has a query, and if there's no articles, then things start to break. So let's see if we can show that breaking. So let's say homepage with articles. So we want to say nope. We don't need to do that because we're actually taking care of it up here. So this will always use something in the cache called homepage. And in our templates, we have two files, one called homepage and one homepage with articles. And what we do is we copy, depending on if we want to show the articles or not. We copy either the homepage with articles, or we copy just a straight homepage. And then we drop it into the cache folder, and we name it homepage regardless. So that makes the logic here much simpler. But I'm not confident that show articles is actually working as we hope. So let's just go ahead and log this. Doesn't look like things are breaking, so that's but we don't have our log. Which is very interesting. I wish the scrolling wasn't so touchy in this. So we do have this debug installed. I think I'm actually, because this is going to be helpful for consumers of the theme. I got to remember the syntax though. It allows you to basically put in a console. That's going to not work out. Debug, let's say npm. It allows you to basically write a console log and just leave it in there full time. And somebody can decide to show that debug or not. So when they would run their Gatsby command, they can just set this debug to enter this. Excuse me. I like how they have windows. Normally they don't show windows. They can decide to show the debug statements or not when they run this. Run the Gatsby command. So I thought there was. I don't really like that. I thought there was a way to pass just a string. Here we go. Debug. Wait. Nope. Browser output streams set dynamically. And it's got some of this built-in stuff too, which is handy. So I thought there was a way that you could dynamically set which environment variable needs to be used. So okay, here, yeah. So here, this is what I'm thinking. So somebody can, when they do the environment variable, pass in this, and they will only get the debug statements that relate to connect body parser. But how does that look when we write it? It might just be let's see what. Yeah, namespace. So I guess we probably want to just namespace this, right? So we can say constant you could say debug, because it's always going to sort of be in this file, and this is on Gatsby theme homepage. Do I want to put my namespace in there? This is starting to get pretty long, I guess. On bootstrap. So we should be able to then say debug. What are the pretty print options? Object all strings, numbers. So these should just be booleans. So we could probably just say, do something like this. There's Gatsby theme articles. Installed. And have you configured the theme to show articles on your homepage? So now, if we instead run this with debug statement in there. So if we do debug equals this, oh boy, I got a big command. Yarn workspace personal dev hard. So Gatsby does a cache, and especially when doing some of this more hacky stuff, the cache is hard to be dependent on. You'll run into weird bugs. So I tend to, in my package.json, add, that would not be the right one. Let's go to the example first. I tend to add a develop script and a build script, but then a version. I don't know how it came about, but a dev hard and a build hard. So basically that cleans out the Gatsby cache before running the build command or the develop command. So it saves you from having to do rm, rf, or Gatsby clean before. Okay, let's see if we got any logs. Okay. So it says that it's not installed. And that's unfortunately getting cut off. That's not great. Let's just shorten this up. Is the theme configured to show articles? I think we probably don't need this because it actually says it in the debug statement. So is the article theme installed? Okay, let's rerun and see what we get. False and false. That would be why it's not working. So our default to show articles on homepage is set to false. So someone will need to actually enable it if they want it by default. And the idea behind that is if somebody installs this and puts this in their config, we don't want to like go changing pages on them without them opting into it. So we need to, in our example that we're using, we need to set show articles on homepage to be true. So that should take care of the second one. Now we're going to need, and this is where I think this on pre-bootstrap phase might not work, because I don't know that we can actually, I don't know if the nodes are ready that we can check to see if there's articles. I could theoretically check if the plugin is put in the config, but we only want to do that if they have articles. So it doesn't make sense to just blindly add it if there's no articles. So we were hoping to see if there was actually article nodes. So we still have show articles on homepage is false. Good thing I checked that. Gatsby theme. Oh, that would be why. This is for the homepage. So we need to switch this to an object. Resolve options true. Try that again. So I think we're probably gonna have to do some perusing to see what the store has. False, and of course, the thing that we care about is not shown. Well, let's try running it again. Maybe it'll show the second time when we're looking at this stuff. Oh boy, Kitty's bumping the mic. Oh. Okay, so this, oh, I did the log before. Okay, well that's probably good actually. Is it just being clipped or what? That's interesting. Why is the second one not showing? If anybody knows a better way to test this, I'm all ears, because rerunning this over and over is kind of a pain. Okay. So for some reason, the second one is not firing now. Show articles on homepage should be set on Gatsby theme homepage options. Show articles on homepage. It's true. It's kind of weird that it's not even showing up. I'm clueless. I mean, the only thing we changed was this. cat hair on my keyboard. Alright, let's just try making that an empty object. See if that's actually what's doing it. I don't know why that would do it, but it's the only thing we changed. Oh, it just got eaten. Well, that's kind of annoying. Okay, so Gatsby added a logger, I believe. We might be able to use that. The search really doesn't work very well for me. I don't know if it's just me, but docs. API. Node helpers, I think. See how good my memory is. Reporter? That might be what I'm thinking of. Yep. So we might need to do something where we actually wrap that in a reporter. So if we do, I think reporter is here. We can do debug. We only wanted to show then, so we can do reporter dot info. Let's see what that looks like. Well, that worked, but it didn't show the information we actually cared about. So it only takes text. We don't want to wrap debug in the reporter because then it's going to show every time. I think I think the kiddo was waking up. Alright, well what we'll do is we'll just do this. Go to template literal. And I think that is going to be the end of this stream after we test this. Moment of truth. Hey, there we go. Okay. Before the child has a conniption. Thanks for showing up, everybody. Great. I was glad to have you, Ryan. It was nice chatting. Anybody else that's watching this afterwards, thanks for stopping by, or who's currently lurking in the stream. I'm glad to have you. Have a good Friday and a nice weekend.